Alright, in the last lecture we talked about the different vulnerability terms and different cybersecurity terms that you should be aware of. In this lecture, we are going to talk about a very common term that most of you must have heard, and that is vulnerability assessment. A vulnerability assessment is a systematic review of the security weaknesses in an information system. It evaluates if the system is susceptible to any known vulnerabilities and assigns the severity levels to those vulnerabilities and then recommends the remediation or mitigation, whatever is necessary. In simple words, it is a process of identifying, quantifying, and prioritizing the vulnerabilities in a system. Now, why you need to do a vulnerability assessment? So examples of threat, let's say, that can be prevented by doing such assessment can be SQL injection or cross-site scripting or code injection attacks. If you are completely new to these terms, I would say do not worry, because in the later part of this course, we are going to see all of these terms. Again, if there are any threats related to escalation of privileges due to faulty authentication mechanisms, even that can be identified with the help of a vulnerability assessment. So vulnerability assessments are typically performed in the following steps. First, the vulnerability assessor. Now, who is a vulnerability assessor? Obviously, the person who has a good knowledge of hacking. So he is a hacker, right? But is he or she a bad hacker? No. The person who performs a vulnerability assessment is known as a penetration tester or an ethical hacker. So first is cataloging the assets and capabilities in a system, what all resources are present in the system, which resources are more vulnerable to the outside world. All these things are first noted down. Then the vulnerability assessor assigns quantifiable value and importance to those resources. For example, identities of users is topmost importance, right? Whereas a file which can be obtained, let's say a free PDF file which can be obtained through 3 or 4 traversals on the website is not that important, because it is already available on the internet for free. So in such cases, the quantifiable value is assigned to various resources. The next step is the penetration tester or the ethical hacker identifies the vulnerabilities or the potential threats to each of the resources. Now, the security scanning process consists of 4 basic steps. First is testing, second is analysis, third is assessment, and fourth is remediation. That is mitigating or eliminating the most serious vulnerabilities for the most valuable resources first. Now, when it comes to vulnerability identification, the objective of this step is to draft a comprehensive list of all the application's security vulnerabilities. Now, security analysts test the security health of the applications, servers, or other systems by scanning them with the automated tools that are already available in the market. Next is vulnerability analysis. The objective of vulnerability analysis step is to identify the source and the root cause of vulnerabilities. For example, if you do not eliminate a cause from its root, obviously there are going to be consequences even after removing some part of the vulnerability. And the third step is risk assessment. So the objective of risk assessment is to prioritize the vulnerabilities. As I said, assigning the quantifiable value comes under risk assessment. The next step is remediation, which is the fourth step here. The objective of this step is the closing of security gaps. It's typically a joint effort by the security staff of the organization, the development and the operations team, who determine the most effective path for the remediation and mitigation of each vulnerability. It can include the introduction of new security procedures, implementing new security measures, and introducing the staff to the new security tools in the market. It can also include updation of all the operational packages and patches, and development and implementation of a patch vulnerability. So, vulnerability assessment cannot be one-off activity. So it's like you cannot do the activity once in a year and the rest of the year is you are risk-free. It's not like that. Organizations who really care about their assets carry out vulnerability assessments at least once in a month. Now, there are some organizations which have inside vulnerability assessment, and there are some organizations who hire people to do the job for them. For example, let's say PQR is a company whose main focus is to provide IT service management facilities like development and developing more applications, databases, etc. Now, for them, it is not necessary to have an inbuilt penetration testing or a vulnerability assessment staff. So what do is they hire ethical hackers and carry out the vulnerability assessment either for their clients or for their own database. But if a company is large enough, let's say like Amazon or even Oracle, they have their own security department in which these analysts are working day and night to prevent such vulnerabilities. So in this case, it is the process of identifying the risks and the computers in the network vulnerabilities and other parts of the IT ecosystem. Now, one of the most important questions is why these assessments are important, or should organizations really focus much time on these assessments? The answer to this question is obviously yes. Early and consistent identification of the threats and the weaknesses in the IT security will obviously help the organization in patching those vulnerabilities instead of getting it exploited. And most cybersecurity compliance and regulatory needs satisfy when the tests or assessments are made. In this way, vulnerability assessments are carried out, and even during security audits, the auditors ask for these reports. So if you are working in an organization in the security department, make sure that the organizations carry out vulnerability assessments and take this very seriously. Now, the reason behind most of the data breaches is many organizations ignore the monthly vulnerability assessments. Either some organizations do it bi-yearly, that is 2 times in a year, or quarterly. But according to many security consultants and experts, vulnerability assessment is a regular process. It is not a one-time process. So every month there must be at least one vulnerability assessment of the organization. So on this note, we will end this lecture. In the next lecture, we will talk about the importance of vulnerability assessment. Although I have explained you the importance of vulnerability assessment in this lecture, in next lecture, we'll see in much more detail. All right, keep the momentum going. I will see you in the next lecture.